This was an action on a policy of insurance, to recover the value of certain slaves thrown overboard for want of water. The declaration stated that by the perils of the seas, and contrary currents and other misfortunes, the ship was rendered foul and leaky, and was retarded in her voyage. And, by reason thereof, so much of the water on board the said ship, for her said voyage, was spent on board the said ship, that before her arrival at Jamaica, to wit, on, etc., a sufficient quantity of water did not remain on board the said ship for preserving the lives of the master and mariners belonging to the said ship, and of the negro slaves on board, for the residue of the said voyage, by reason whereof, during the said voyage, and before the arrival of the said ship at Jamaica, to wit, on, etc., and on divers days between that day and the arrival of the said ship at Jamaica, 60 negroes died for want of water for sustenance, and 40 others, for want of water for sustenance, and through thirst and frenzy thereby occasioned, threw themselves into the sea and were drowned. And the master and mariners, for the preservation of their own lives, and the lives of the rest of the negroes, which for want of water they could not otherwise preserve, were obliged to throw overboard 150 other negroes.
So we started as a group with 2 questions. How do we talk about it? Meaning, is it possible to talk about ultimate suffering of the other without appropriating the story? As we cannot possibly put ourselves in their position, and we shouldn't. The narrative does not belong to us. But if we decide that we can't talk about it, the second question is what happens if we don't talk about it? Many of my students, although they knew many other stories, they didn't know the story of the suffering of the Zong people. So the story, if we don't talk about it, the story of the suffering may slide into oblivion. Students' work was guided by the principle of difficulty of discussing the story of the massacre, and by the question of whether it is at all possible to talk about the suffering of extreme order, whether art, whether any human expression can give justice to the event in the face of which we become speechless. The crucial aspect of the students' work was the fact that they were investigating a narrative which does not belong to them, does not belong to us, and which must not be appropriated. The students learned during other courses about the work of key post-colonial authors and contemporary indigenous authors. In preparation for the task, we also investigated our position in relation to the story of Zong by looking at Susan Sontag's seminal text regarding the pain of others and Primo Levi's work. Both of the authors discussed the issue of relating to those historical narratives which regard suffering and violence. Students' principal task was to create work which would aim at saving the memory of the loss from sliding into oblivion, which essentially meant representing the void, the absence, as no accounts of lives, deaths, names, or identities of the victims survived, and they cannot be really recreated. Perhaps they even shouldn't be recreated, as that would mean an appropriation.
Definitely, I'm glad that I had a chance to work with it, because it opened me to some new methods, and I think that it not only it opened me as a teacher, but I think that also students, because they had a chance to indeed work with others, work in a creative way, and work on someone else's creations. So it was also, I think, something inspiring, something illuminating for them.
We have this space. My idea is that we will work in groups. So if we've got 30 students, it might be groups of 6 students, with each team having 2 or 3 of us working with them. When we've done workshops like this in the past, I think one of the big things for the students has been the opportunity to work with us, and work with adults, older people, in a different way than they usually work with people, working alongside them. It's that group process that I think they've really enjoyed. So the idea is that we are all creating this exhibition using this material. So we have to encounter the material, and I think that my thinking is that none of us should be like experts, none of us know much about this material at this stage. We're really encountering it. Our job is simply to arrange an exhibition. So we're looking at this and we're trying to make sense of it ourselves. So I don't think, sometimes some of the students wrote notes or to explain what their thinking was, but I don't think we need to look at that. I think we're probably best without that and just trying to encounter an image like this and see what we think about it, and then how we should display it.
And what's the exhibition for? Do they have any ideas to who the exhibition is for and who the potential audience is?
Well, we can decide that. I think it's the Museum of Lost Stories, where we're thinking about it as a place which is a real place, not simply a virtual place. The Museum of Lost Stories does special exhibitions on people whose stories have been lost in time and lost in history. So I suppose we're thinking of an audience that knows what they're coming to, really. They know that this is. And so I haven't really thought beyond this idea that we are creating an exhibition and we have to look at these materials and then we have to think about how it's displayed. And not simply, then I think it's not simply a case of, okay, let's put some pictures up in the frames. It's actually, how do we present this to an audience? How do we help them to encounter this work in the best way? So I think that's completely open. That's the question you can ask. And particularly since it is material that is dealing with, well, it's a terrible event that's being represented here. So I think that it should be open to inventiveness. And you could make it quite a sort of experiential thing for an audience coming in to see this exhibition. I mean, for example, this whole thing about words, these sort of selections of odd words. I just had this image when I came in here today of people spread out in the space and pressing the button on the microphones and each person saying one word from this text. For example, it's just a way that you can invent how you want to present something.
be different if they were photographs.
They didn't have photographs.
Exactly, if they were photographs.
And then a living colours and a living landscape.
And check the first one is mirror image
Yeah,
of
mirror,
image
yeah.
of your mirrored image.
Imagine that this space is an exhibition space, and we are going to use it to create an exhibition for visitors, international visitors who are going to come and look at this artwork. So our job today is to start work on creating this exhibition. So we are designers who are creating the exhibition. And of course we're going to have to think about how exactly we display it, how we present it to the visitors. Because I suppose we have to balance impact and safety, so people feel protected and they won't be too shocked by the material, but they engage with it. And of course we know that we're concerned as well that we're not appropriating these stories as if they're our own. Those are always things we have to be aware of.